Okay, so this is a 2012 Nissan Leaf SL that I purchased as a salvage vehicle, and I'm in the process of tearing down to relocate the drive system into another vehicle. But I thought it would be interesting to have a look while it's partially torn down but still all wired up and running, to get a look at kind of all the major components so you can see where they are in the vehicle. And then I'll plan to do another one of these videos after everything's been removed so you can see the system outside the vehicle. So coming around to the front here, so the inverter up on the top here is probably the first thing you notice. That's really just kind of a decorative cover mostly. It extends in back there. So that is the main speed controller for the electric drive system. In behind there is the DC junction box. So that's where the DC to DC converter is that supplies 12 volt power when the high voltage system is running. And then we have the auxiliary battery right next to that that gives 12 volt power when it's not running. And here's the IPDM right next to that, which is essentially the main fuse and relay box, but it's got its own CAN controller. So every time a relay gets turned on or off, it's also sending out data on the network to let the other controllers know, so that they can make sure that the signals they see at the other end are consistent with what the controller thinks is going on. So that's just one of the safety checks built in here. There's a number of sub-fuse boxes that are all connected into that. So one up there, one here in front of the battery, there's another one over here on the passenger side, and you can see the wiring connectors here where the headlight modules have been removed. Those were pretty damaged on this vehicle. Fortunately, pretty much everything else is working. So then down here you can actually see in the front the condenser for the AC system, and behind the radiator, and then behind that the electric cooling fan shroud. So the fans are in behind there. And then of course sticking out the front here we've got our charge ports. It was a nice surprise, this vehicle has the quick charge port, and then you can see the high voltage wiring coming out from behind the charger, and that actually runs all the way into the back of the vehicle where the charger is located. And then down underneath here, it's pretty difficult to see, but I'll try and shine a little light in there. That's where the actual drive motor sits, in underneath the inverter. So once we get everything apart, we'll be able to see that a lot better. So other things up in the front here might be of interest is this is the the electrically driven intelligent braking unit. Basically it's the master cylinder for the brake system, so it's tied to the brake pedal. But it too's got its own controller up on the top here, and this is actually what, when you press on the brake, it says, okay, I need this much total braking force, and it asks the VCM to supply a certain amount of regenerative braking, and then once the VCM responds, it matches that up with an appropriate amount of hydraulic braking pressure to reach the total required. And then over on the other side here, this is where the ABS controller is. So that's your anti-lock braking, traction control, stability control, etc. So you can see all the hydraulic lines going in and out of there that allow it to independently modulate the braking force at each wheel. So that's also where your wheel speed sensors are going into, in addition to the data from the airbag system with its accelerometers. Okay, so you can see a lot of these cooling lines running over the top. So it's interesting, there's actually essentially two coolant loops. So the main one from the radiator cools the inverter, motor, and actually runs back and cools the charger as well. And that all uses this electric water pump right here. But there's actually a second coolant loop that actually provides the heat for the vehicle. So that's what this expansion tank, which you can see is one of the few things that was damaged on this vehicle. so it's been leaking. Fortunately, I don't need the heating system since I'm in Phoenix. And but anyway, that runs down to a big electric resistive heater down inside there, and circulates coolant through it using this water pump here. And then that goes through the heater core inside, lets you have heat since there's no gas engine in here to produce waste heat. So then this is actually the coolant tank for the radiator, and over on the other side here is the expansion tank for that. And then right up top next to it's the brake fluid reservoir. Okay, so I think that's pretty much everything up under the hood. So let's head inside. Get myself in here with my light so you can hopefully see something. Okay, so you can see a pretty extensive amount of disassembly has been done in here. The whole, more or less the whole interior and dash has been removed, but then pretty much everything has been reconnected temporarily to allow the vehicle to continue to operate so it can be testing. So down in under the driver's side here, you can see all the various switches that had been in the dash panels. So those are generally all still hooked up. There's another fuse box up here, and then the diagnostic port, which I've got a Wi-Fi scanner on so I can use Leaf Spy. It's been really helpful for resetting DCCs and the like. And then I'm going to try to get in under here and show you the BCM. It's kind of hard to see, but yeah, there it is up there. A lot of wires going in and out of it. So the body control module is basically what runs all of the switches and lights and doors and security functions. So this is essentially the same as in a gasoline powered car. And then up above that, here is the steering column coming through there, and you can actually then see the part of the electric power steering mechanism sticking out there. You can see a bit more of it up top. So if we come up here, here's our combination meter, and here's the speedometer, and then in here is the top end of that electric power steering. So, and we've also removed the airbags out of the steering wheel here. So that's one of the few things I haven't put back in, is the airbags, just for safety reasons. But fortunately the vehicle runs just fine without them. It just complains a little bit. So there's a error code for that and a light on the dash, but other than that everything's fine. So here's the AV cluster. So built into the back of this is actually the AC amplifier that essentially runs the climate control system. And then of course the actual AV unit with the nav system. I'll stick this back up here. So in behind there, running all the way from up here all the way down in under here, is essentially the fan control. So there's the fans, the heater core, the evaporator for the AC system, and then all the various servos for whether you want it blowing in your face or on your feet or etc. So in under the bottom here, this is actually the electronic shift control module. So the shifter is back here, but it's basically just seems to be a bunch of switches. And then this is the actual controller that decides whether or not it's safe to go into any particular gear based on a whole variety of inputs. And then we've got the power switch here, and sitting on the side of that is actually the NATS amplifier, which is essentially a backup for the smart key system. So if your battery is dead in your smart key, you just hold up the key right there, and this will excite a passive RFID sensor in the key and still allow you to start the car. So that's handy. Then coming over to the passenger side here, you can see we've removed the passenger airbag. You can see these two antennas that have been pulled out of the dash. So this is the cellular antenna for the telemetric system, and this guy up here is the GPS antenna for the nav. Up in the front here, I believe this is one of the smart key sensors for when you've got the key in your pocket. And then if we come in underneath here, so that is the VCM behind where the glove box would have been, and that is essentially the heart of the brains of the electric drive system. So that talks to the battery and the inverter and the motor, and decides exactly how much power to use, as well as during charging actually tells the charger how much current to be putting in the battery. And then over to the right of that, kind of bracketed on the side, that's the TCU box, the telemetrics box. So that is what gives you your cellular radio link to let you connect to the app on your phone with the CarWings data. Alrighty. So then let's make our way back to look at the battery here. So obviously this is not the stock location for the battery. The battery's been removed from the bottom of the car, and some modifications have been done, and then it's been reinstalled back into the car just to test those all out. But that kind of lets us see everything a little easier. So down here, the high voltage orange cable there, as well as the black control cable, have been rerouted into the cabin to allow them to reconnect to the battery. The black box here is the battery junction box. So that is mostly the contactors, the big system master relays that connect the battery to the rest of the drive system when it's determined that it's safe to do so. Then we've got the original stack of 24 modules here. You can see the big bundles of BMS wires coming out of there, going to the battery monitor system. And then if we slide around to the back seat, or I guess before we do that, the yellow connectors here, right behind the shifter, is where the Airbag Controller originally was. So as I said, that's all been removed for make it a little safer while I'm poking around in here. In addition to that, we've still got the parking brake controller and the display for the shifter still connected. And then you can actually see the safety disconnect for the battery right here. And like I said, let's head into the back seat. So back here you can see that the other half of the battery has been also rewired into a 24 module pack. So for the vehicle I'm putting this in, it was simpler just to have two sort of identical 24 module packs. This one I've used another bus bar set from a stock 24 module pack, but then I've reused all the BMS connections from the pack that came with this car, so that when I put those onto the right cell, everything is pinned out correctly at the connectors to plug right back into the BMS. So I didn't end up having to cut any wires or rewire any connectors. So just by putting these little metal clips on the right cells, they all end up in the right place, and they all end up right back there at the BMS, which is hanging on the end of that stack of battery cells. And maybe you can kind of see all those big bundles of orange wires going in under the bottom there. So if we come back toward the back of the vehicle, this is the charger, the 3 kilowatt charger. It was originally behind the back seat, so it's still in its original location. The seat's just not there anymore. It's got a big noise filter on it that isolates it from the AC line, and then the high voltage and AC lines go in under that piece of black plastic there. I've just put there to protect them, but they actually drop through the floor of the vehicle and normally run along the top of the battery pack. And then back here also we have the backup power unit for the electric brakes, the electric power assist on the brakes, I should say. It's hydraulic brakes, but in the event that you lose power, this will allow you to continue to have the electric assist on the brakes for a certain amount of time. Basically a big capacitor bank. So that's pretty much everything inside here. There's a few more bits that haven't gone back in. So you can see this is the airbag controller. Got those big yellow connectors on it. And then this is the battery heater relay unit. And actually here are the battery heaters, so those probably are not going to go back in since we're in Phoenix. And other than that, you can see there's some of the bottom part of the battery casing. The floor basically all comes out as carpeting, comes out as one big unit, which was a bit of a surprise. And then there's some of the top of the casing. So that's pretty much it. That's where we are right now. And hopefully, if all goes well, in another week or two, I'll have everything out of the vehicle and we can have a look at what everything looks like when it's outside.